Pecha Kucha 36, Injustice 2, and Nier Automata. So these are some things I wanted to talk about for a few weeks, but I kind of had to put university work first because those Pecha Kuchas are being handed in as part of my assessment. So here's what I was actually doing during that time. So Injustice 2 is a beat 'em up by NetherRealm Studios, the creators of Mortal Kombat. Um, I was watching Let's Play footage and I was very impressed by the kind of the graphical fidelity, and I really do enjoy watching like the story mode cutscenes and just the beat 'em up bits are skipped out. So I started watching stuff and I was just kind of surprised by how good the graphics were. Like literally the first thing I saw was Batman, and it's kind of a new suit, but it looks feasible for a real person to wear. The materials are very good looking, and you can see the eyeshadow on his face. It seems credible. The narrative delivery of NetherRealm Studios beat 'em ups is it's difficult to stop watching once you start. So this is kind of about Superman kills the Joker, and Batman's like killing dudes is a line you don't cross. Injustice 1 is about Batman putting Superman in jail for that. And the way the narrative is done in this game is a lot of the clever things are said between characters. So Robin is complaining about Batman punching a dude into a coma, but still having the nerve to tell Superman he shouldn't kill serial killers. Injustice isn't the smartest thing in the world, but it does what it does very well. Like the special moves, Superman's where he just punches a dude into this glorious looking like sky, then punches them back to the ground. It's overkill, and it's you got to suspend your disbelief. But the visual spectacle is very impressive. Brainiac says some very clever things. I've just been listening to his dialogue a lot. He says to the Flash, I'm going to conquer the Speed Force, and the Flash says, I don't think so, and he retorts with, humans barely think at all, which is exactly what I was thinking I would say if I was him, and it's the level that dialogue is kind of synergizing with what I think is why I like the game so much. So I was printing with my printer because I had to, and I was printing on normal paper, and I just did a test JPEG print, and I got these weird like grooves where there's no ink in the printout, and it kind of got me quite worried. I was printing a lot of kind of block black imagery because I like that kind of stuff. I mean, I printed this on card. As you can see, there's a white strip where the printer kind of bent the paper, but it did print the black without any trouble, and it's actually the slight grooves you probably can't see on that thing, on that image. They're not there on the actual printout, so I can print block black. The printer prints what I do, so I use wet edges when I use brushes in Photoshop, so my black is actually grey until I go over it a second time. I think ultimately I'm going to stop doing this because you don't really notice it when you're working digitally, but when you print it out, it's super obvious. I printed booklets in InDesign, and it actually worked. It's a bizarre combination of having to figure out how to do it in InDesign and sync that with your printer. My relationship with InDesign is antagonistic, and I need to change that because it's a great place to make comics. Scott McCloud does his lettering in InDesign, and he knows what he's talking about, so it seems like a good idea for me to come to terms with InDesign, especially since I probably am going to want to do some proper books as well. I am not going to enjoy having to manage that kind of word count in a digital program. So Nier Automata is kind of, it's like a JRPG action kind of hybrid, a little bit like Bayonetta, and it's also a combination of a bullet hell shooter. Very ambitious. My favourite games are games that are very ambitious. It's not about meeting all the ambitions, it's about having good ideas. The game has an awful lot of endings, and one ending involves you kind of suiciding from the equipment screen because you play as an android and you can remove your CPU, effectively turning yourself off, and you get like a spoof ending which puts you back on the title screen. I think there's a lot of those. There's three main protagonists, playable characters, and the first time you see the credits, you're only a third of the way through the game, and I like that fact that it messes with the general pacing. Usually a game is done when you get to the credits. but sometimes the most interesting things are what happens immediately after the conclusion, and I wish more games would look at that. It is a pretentious game. It tries to be coy and clever, like the fact the characters wear blindfolds that don't impede their vision, but somehow they come off when they have these major revelations, which aren't so major. It's a game that you'll thoroughly enjoy as you play it, but once you stop playing it, you realize it's not as good as it thinks it is. So you play as androids who are in a war against machines. The game doesn't do a particularly good job of defining what that means. What is an android? What is a machine? Which is a problem because it tries to subvert your expectations, but it doesn't establish the status quo to subvert. This is also true of narrative, major plot points. You work for Yorha as an android as part of the army to reclaim the Earth for the humans who've been exiled to the moon. You can see some of the plot twists that this envisages coming from a mile away, but they're not twists if they don't twist your existing expectations. The game is good, and it does do good things. Like some of the side quest characters end up being pulled into the main plot, and things go a bit nuts. And it can have an emotional. You can have an emotional response to that stuff. So it's a good game. I recommend it, but don't expect a 10 out of 10. So what do I have to do going forward? I need to take an inventory stock of what's in my room. I've got all kinds of stuff. And I need to see what I can do with that stuff going forward. And this is primarily so I can figure out where to store this stuff so I can get a custom PC, because it's a bit too taxing for my laptop to record what I do on Photoshop while I'm doing it. It lags, and that's not cool. And I need some kind of advice about what to do next. You know, I have a, let's be generous and call it a business plan. And I need to run it past some people who deal with these kinds of things, because, you know, I have to be my own brand now, which is nice. So that brings us to the end of Pecha Kucha 36, and I will see you next time.